Most fruit tree owners prune in winter because that's what the extension office recommends. Dormant season. No stress. Clean cuts. What they don't tell you is that winter pruning removes the energy reserves your tree spent 8 months building. You trim away the stored carbohydrates before they convert to fruit. April pruning works differently. The tree is actively moving energy upward. A cut made now redirects that flow into existing fruit spurs instead of replacement wood. The result is 40 pounds of cherries instead of 14. 7 trees. 1 April window. Here's why timing is the only variable that matters. You prune in winter because every gardening guide says to. Dormant season. Minimal stress. Clean cuts on sleeping wood. The logic sounds reasonable until you understand what you're actually removing. A fruit tree spends March through November building carbohydrate reserves. Those reserves live in the cambium layer, in the branch tips, in the wood you're trimming off in January. Winter pruning doesn't protect the tree. It strips the fuel system before the engine has a chance to run. Here's what most people miss. Pruning timing isn't about the tree's comfort. It's about energy direction. Cut a branch in January, and the tree responds by healing the wound using stored reserves that would otherwise feed fruit development. Cut the same branch in April, and you intercept energy that is actively moving upward. The tree doesn't spend reserves on healing. It redirects the flow into existing fruit spurs, into blossom clusters already forming, into the production architecture you want to expand. You're not pruning earlier. You're pruning at the exact moment the cut changes what the tree builds next. The biological mechanism is wound sealing speed. In January, soil temperature is below 45 degrees. Cambium activity is near zero. A pruning wound made in winter stays open for 6 to 10 weeks before callus tissue forms. That's 6 to 10 weeks of potential disease entry, of energy leaking from an unprotected cut, of a tree using protein reserves to patch damage instead of setting fruit. In April, soil temperature is 55 to 65 degrees. Cambium is fully active. The same wound seals in 7 to 14 days. You're not asking the tree to heal through 2 months of cold. You're making a cut the tree closes before the energy wave passes. But here's the reality. Most fruit tree owners miss the April window entirely because they're following advice designed for commercial orchards in cold climates where labor scheduling, not biology, drives the calendar. That advice got copied into home gardening guides without the context that made it relevant. You're gardening with a rule built for a system you're not operating. The result is trees that produce a fraction of their biological capacity every single year, while you assume the problem is variety selection or soil nutrition. April pruning works across 7 specific trees. Not every fruit tree responds equally. Stone fruits respond fastest. Pome fruits respond with compounding gains over 2 to 3 seasons. Understanding which tree needs what, cut in which week of April is the difference between tripling your harvest this year and waiting another full season to find out you pruned at the wrong time again. Tree 1 is apple. And this is where April timing separates productive home orchards from ornamental trees that happen to occasionally produce fruit. Most apple tree owners prune in late February or early March, removing crossing branches and last year's water sprouts. The cuts look clean. The tree looks managed. But February pruning on apples removes spur wood, the short, stubby 2 to 3-year-old branches where 80% of apple production actually occurs. Most people can't identify spur wood from new wood in February because both look dormant. In April, the difference is visible. Spur wood shows swollen blossom buds. New wood shows only leaf buds. You can see exactly what you're keeping and exactly what you're removing. Start apple pruning in the first week of April. Remove water sprouts, the vertical shoots growing straight up from scaffold branches, by cutting flush at the base. Remove any branch growing inward toward the tree center, crowding air circulation. Keep all horizontal and slightly angled branches showing swollen spur clusters. The target structure is an open vase, light reaching every spur, air moving through the canopy, no branch shading another. February pruned apple trees average 18 to 24 apples per mature branch cluster. April pruned trees average 40 to 55. Same tree, same root system, same soil. The difference is spur identification and energy redirection timed to the active growth window. One correctly pruned apple tree produces 60 to 90 pounds of fruit. 10 trees give you a full season of fresh eating, plus 40 quarts of sauce, and enough dried rings to supply winter snacking through March. Tree 2 is pear. And this is where most gardeners make a mistake that costs them 3 years of production. Pears are biennial bearers by default. Left unmanaged, they produce heavily 1 year and almost nothing the next, because the tree exhausts its carbohydrate reserves in a single massive fruiting event and needs a full season to recover. April pruning breaks the biennial cycle. Thinning cuts made in the second week of April reduce the fruit load the tree is preparing to set, which preserves enough reserves to support moderate production the following year as well. But you trade one enormous harvest for 2 consistent harvests across 2 seasons. Over 3 years, managed April pruned pears outproduce unmanaged trees by 70% in total yield. Remove any branch thicker than your thumb that is growing at an angle steeper than 45 degrees. These steep angle branches produce minimal fruit and compete for energy with the horizontal scaffold where pear spurs cluster. Tie remaining branches to horizontal positions using soft ties and stakes if needed. Horizontal growth triggers fruit spur development in pears more reliably than any fertilizer application. April pruned pears in year 1 produce 30 to 45 pounds per mature tree. By year 3, with scaffold training reinforced each April, production reaches 55 to 70 pounds. That's $140 to $175 worth of organic pears per tree at current market rates from a tree that required 90 minutes of April work and nothing else. Tree 3 is cherry, and this is where April timing becomes genuinely non-negotiable. Cherry trees are the most timing sensitive of the 7 because they move from blossom to harvest in 60 to 70 days. A pruning cut made in April directly influences the blossom clusters that will become fruit in June and July. Miss the window, and you're not just leaving yield on the table, you're actively triggering a bacterial response. Cherry wood pruned after blossom drop is vulnerable to bacterial canker for 4 to 6 weeks. Prune in April, before blossoms fully open, and wound sealing outpaces bacterial infiltration. Prune in May, and you're inoculating open cuts during the highest disease pressure period of the season. Prune cherries in the 3rd week of April. Remove any branch showing dead wood, dry, brittle, no green cambium when scratched. Remove branches crossing the center of the canopy. Cherry trees naturally want to grow upright and dense. Your job is to force spread. Tie the 2 strongest scaffold branches to a near horizontal position using 45-degree ties anchored to the trunk. This redirects growth energy from vertical extension into lateral fruiting spurs along the full length of each branch. Winter pruned cherry trees produce 15 to 22 pounds of fruit per mature tree in their 4th year. April pruned trees with horizontal scaffold training produce 35 to 50 pounds. That's not a marginal improvement. That's redesign. One correctly managed cherry tree supplies 8 weeks of fresh eating from mid-June through August, plus enough surplus for 12 to 15 jars of preserves. Tree 4 is plum, and this is where most backyard orchards make their biggest systemic error. Plum trees sucker aggressively. New shoots emerge from the rootstock below the graft union every spring, growing fast and vigorous while the productive canopy above struggles to compete for root energy. Most gardeners either ignore the suckers or cut them in fall when they've already consumed a full season of carbohydrates. April is the correct removal window. Suckers pulled or cut flush in the 1st week of April, before they harden, redirect that root energy upward into the graft union canopy where all production occurs. Beyond sucker removal, plum pruning in April targets the same crossing branch and inward growth patterns as apple. But plums have one additional requirement. Thinning cuts on fruit spurs themselves. Plum spurs cluster 3 to 5 blossoms on a single short spur. Left unpruned, all 5 attempt to fruit. The tree sets all 5 and then drops 3 in June because it cannot support the load. You end up with 2 small plums per spur instead of 2 large ones, and the drop event itself stresses the tree's reserves. Thin to 2 blossoms per spur in the 3rd week of April, when blossoms are visible but not yet open. The remaining two develop into full-sized fruit without a stress drop. April-managed plum trees produce 40 to 60 pounds annually by year 3. Unmanaged trees with winter pruning and no spur thinning produce 18 to 25 pounds of undersized fruit. The same root system. The difference is understanding what the tree is trying to do, and correcting it at the moment intervention is cheapest. Tree 5 is peach. And this is the tree that most dramatically rewards April precision. Peaches fruit only on 1-year-old wood. Not spurs, not multi-year branches, only wood that grew last summer. This means your entire pruning strategy for peaches is different from every other tree on this list. You are not preserving old structure. You are removing it and replacing it with last year's growth every single April. Identify the strongest shoots from the previous summer. Pencil thick, flexible, reddish-brown bark, 18 to 24 inches long. These are your production branches for the current season. Select 4 to 6 of these per scaffold arm. Remove everything else. Older wood. Weak, thin shoots under 12 inches. Any growth showing gray or cracked bark. The result looks severe. A correctly April-pruned peach tree loses 40 to 50% of its total branch volume. This is not damage. This is the system working. February-pruned peach trees average 30 to 40 fruits. April-pruned trees on the same rootstock, with old wood removed and last year's growth preserved, average 70 to 90 fruits. The fruit is also larger because you've eliminated the competition load that forces the tree to split resources across too many developing peaches. Peaches pruned correctly in April produce fruit averaging 6 to 8 ounces each. Unpruned or winter-pruned trees produce fruit averaging 3 to 4 ounces. You're not just growing more peaches, you're growing different peaches. Tree 6 is fig. And this surprises most people because figs are generally described as low maintenance. They are low maintenance once established. But April is the one window where a single cut determines whether you get one harvest or two. Figs in temperate climates produce 2 crops. The breba crop on last year's wood in June, and the main crop on current season wood in August through September. Most gardeners sacrifice the breba crop without knowing it by heading back fig branches in late winter. The breba crop grows from the same buds you're removing. Prune figs in the second week of April, after breba buds are visible as small green swellings at each node, but before new growth has extended more than 1 inch. Remove only dead wood and any branch growing directly downward or into the center of the canopy. Leave all wood showing breba buds intact. You'll harvest the breba crop in June. The main crop follows on new wood through September. 2 harvests instead of 1 from the same tree. Fig production on a correctly April-managed mature tree runs 80 to 120 fruits per season, split across both crops. Tree 7 is quince, and this is the most underutilized high-yield tree in temperate backyard orchards. For the same reason eggplant gets ignored. People assume it requires expertise. It doesn't. Quince is disease-resistant, drought-tolerant once established, and productive on poor soil where other fruit trees struggle. The catch is that quince blooms late, in late April to early May, which means pruning must happen in the first 10 days of April before blossom wood is at risk. Remove crossing branches and any growth below the main scaffold. Quince produces on 2-year-old wood, and so preserve all second-year growth, showing fat terminal buds. A mature quince pruned correctly in the first April week produces 40 to 60 pounds of fruit, worth $4 to $6 per pound at specialty markets. That's a $200 return from a tree that asked for 1 hour of correctly timed April work and nothing else. These 7 trees, managed with the same April window logic, create something most backyard orchards never achieve: a self-reinforcing production system. Here is what 7 correctly pruned trees produce across a single season. Apples from late August through October. Pears from late July through September. Cherries in June and July. Plums in July and August. Peaches in August. Figs in June, and again in August through September. Quince in October through November. No gap from June through November. A no glut that overwhelms your kitchen in a single week. A staggered, overlapping harvest that runs 5 months with something ripening at every point along the arc. This is not accidental. This is the direct result of April pruning applied to trees selected for sequential ripening. You're not managing 7 separate trees. You're operating a production system with intentional timing built into its architecture. The April window is when you set that timing for the entire season ahead. Here's the reality. Most backyard orchards produce in a single chaotic 2-week window because the trees were planted without a ripening sequence plan and pruned without a yield direction strategy. You end up with 80 pounds of apples in the 3rd week of September and nothing else all summer. April pruning doesn't just increase yield per tree. It distributes yield across time so the system is manageable and the output is actually usable. Companion planting under these 7 trees closes the system further. Plant comfrey in a ring 18 inches from each trunk. Comfrey roots reach 6 feet deep, mine calcium and potassium from subsoil layers, and die back as mulch that decomposes directly into the root zone. You're importing nutrients from below the soil layer your tree roots occupy and depositing them exactly where uptake occurs. Plant white clover as ground cover between trees. Clover fixes atmospheric nitrogen through root nodules at a rate of 50 to 150 pounds per acre annually. By year 2, you're not buying nitrogen fertilizer. The ground cover is manufacturing it. Plant garlic around the drip line of cherry and peach trees in October. In garlic's sulfur compounds suppress the soil-borne fungal pressure that targets stone fruit roots. Pull it in June, cure it, and store it. You're harvesting a useful crop from space that would otherwise grow nothing while it's simultaneously protecting your most vulnerable trees. The dollar math on this system is not ambiguous. A mature apple tree managed with April pruning produces 70 to 90 pounds annually. Organic apples at $3.50 per pound represent $245 to $315 per tree. A managed peach tree produces 70 to 90 fruits, averaging 7 ounces each, roughly 30 to 40 pounds, worth $160 to $200 at $5 per pound organic. A quince tree produces 40 to 60 pounds at $5 per pound specialty market value, $200 to $300 per tree. 7 trees managed correctly generate $800 to $1,200 worth of fruit annually by year 3. Though your April investment is 6 to 8 hours of pruning work spread across 4 weeks, that's not a hobby. That's a parallel food supply that compounds in value every season. Year 1, focus on learning the cut. Apple, pear, and plum first. Forgiving trees where a slightly mistimed cut doesn't collapse the season. Understand spur wood versus new wood. Learn to identify the energy direction before you cut. Year 2, add cherry and peach. These require more precision, but the biology is now familiar. Apply horizontal scaffold training to pear. Reinforce comfrey and clover companions. Year 3, the full system is operational. Your soil is building fertility through root decomposition and nitrogen fixation. Your trees are producing on managed scaffolds you built over 2 April sessions. Your harvest window runs June through November without a gap. D for preservation. Match the processing method to each fruit's peak. Cherries. Pit and freeze whole in a single layer before bagging. 40 pounds fills 4-gallon bags and supplies baking through February. Peaches. Blanch 30 seconds. Slip skins. Halve and freeze on sheet trays, then bag. Or slice and dehydrate at 135 degrees for 8 to 10 hours. Dried peaches from 1 tree fill 2-quart jars and last 12 months. Apples. Core and slice thin. Dehydrate or make sauce in batches as they ripen through September. Quince. Poach in sugar syrup and jar as paste, membrillo, which stores for a year and sells for $12 per jar at farmers markets if you produce surplus. Now here is exactly what April looks like week by week. Week 1, April 1st through 7th. Prune quince first, before any blossom wood is at risk. Remove dead wood and inward growth. Prune apple next, identifying and preserving all spur clusters. Remove water sprouts flush at the base. Week 2, April 8th through 14th. Prune pear with horizontal scaffold ties. Pull plum suckers below the graft union and thin fruit spurs to 2 blossoms each. Prune cherry, targeting dead wood and center-crossing branches before blossoms open. Week 3, April 15th through 21st. Prune peach aggressively, removing all wood older than 1 year, selecting 4 to 6 vigorous shoots per scaffold arm. Week 4, April 22nd through 30th. Prune fig, preserving all breba budwood, removing only dead material. Do a final pass on plum and apple for any missed water sprouts. Tools needed: bypass pruners for cuts under 1/2 inch, loppers for branches up to 1.5 inches, a pruning saw for anything larger. Bypass only. Never anvil pruners. Which crush cambium tissue and slow wound sealing by 7 to 10 days. No pruning paste. Research since 2005 consistently shows wound sealants trap moisture and slow callus formation. Clean cuts, correctly timed, seal faster without any sealant applied. By late April, you'll see the first response signal: swelling at cut sites where callus tissue is forming. By June, cherry and fig harvests begin. By August, peaches and plums are at peak. By October, apples and quince close the season. By year 3, you're walking into an orchard that produces $1,000 worth of fruit annually, maintains its own soil fertility, and requires 8 hours of April work plus weekly harvesting in season. That's not improvement, that's redesign. April isn't early. It's the only window that matters. You miss it this year, and you're waiting until next April to find out what your trees were actually capable of producing all along.